Hello, everyone. I'm June Rawl, the director for IPDAY, and I'm so happy all of you could join us today. Today's webinar is titled Supporting Students with Disabilities by Utilizing Universal Design. Many of you have reached out to us to learn more about addressing the needs of our adult students with disabilities. In this webinar, our facilitator, Alex Ramirez, will discuss the principles of universal design and how these principles can help all learners engage in their lessons wholeheartedly. Before we get started, I will remind you of a few housekeeping reminders. You are all in listen-only mode. If you do have a question, pop it into the Q&A option. At the end of the presentation, Alex will address any questions that are there. The presentation is recorded and it will be archived on the IPDAY website within 48 hours. Remember that this presentation, along with an accompanied handbook, is already loaded on the IPDAY website. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex and we're going to get started. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, June, for that introduction, and thank you all for joining me today. My name is Alex Ramirez, and I'll be your presenter. And I am excited to share this really important information with you, as I find that the implementation of universal design for learning is a critical component of providing educational access to all of our students. Before we get started, I'm just going to cover something. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to type it into the Q&A option. I will have some time at the end of the presentation to address those. As we begin our webinar today, I'd like to begin with a question. What is universal design, and how can we as educators apply it in our classrooms? The University of Washington defines universal design as the process of creating products that are accessible to people with a wide range of abilities, disabilities, and other characteristics. Universally designed products accommodate individual preferences and abilities, communicate necessary information effectively, regardless of ambient conditions or users' sensory abilities, and can be approached, reached, manipulated, and used regardless of an individual's body size, posture, or mobility. The application of universal design principles minimizes the need for assistive technology, which results in products compatible with assistive technology and makes products more usable by everyone, not only people with disabilities. Typically, products are designed to be most suitable for the average user. In contrast, products that are designed according to the principles of universal design are designed to be able to be used by everyone to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. In education, the application of the tenets of universal design manifest themselves as universal design for learning, or UDL. The application of universal design for learning in the classroom allows teachers to ensure that they are removing as many barriers as possible in the learning environment and providing all students with equal access to learning and curricular concepts. The Universal Design for Learning guidelines, developed by the Center for Applied Special Technology, are a tool used in the implementation of UDL, a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people, which is based on scientific insights into how humans learn. The UDL guidelines can be used by educators, curriculum developers, researchers, parents, and anyone else who wants to implement the UDL framework in a learning environment. These guidelines offer a set of concrete suggestions that can be applied to any discipline or domain to ensure that learners can access and participate in meaningful, challenging learning opportunities. According to CAST, UDL is a framework to guide the design of learning environments, which are accessible and challenging for everyone. Ultimately, the goal of UDL is to support learners and become expert learners who are each in their own way purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, and strategic and goal-driven. UDL aims to change the design of the environment rather than to change the learner. When environments are intentionally designed to reduce barriers, all learners can engage in rigorous and meaningful learning. The Universal Design for Learning framework values diversity through proactive design of an inclusive curriculum, thereby eliminating or reducing barriers to academic success. Initially proposed as a means for including students with disabilities in the general classroom, it is now better understood as a general education initiative that improves outcomes for all learners. The successful implementation of UDL in the classroom relies on a framework of 3 principles: engagement, representation, and action and expression. Each of these principles support a different component of effective instructional strategies, which promote meaningful and challenging learning scenarios, which are easily accessible by all students. This UDL framework not only values diversity through the implementation of inclusive curriculum, but focuses on the removal of barriers to academic success. Although UDL is now being used more commonly in general education and adult education settings, it originated to include students with disabilities in general education classroom activities. Within each of the UDL framework principles, there are 4 curriculum components which address implementation measures: goals, methods, materials, and assessments. The purpose of UDL in the classroom is to remove these barriers and allow all students to achieve mastery of curricular goals while learning to assess their own learning needs, monitor their own progress, and regulate and sustain their interest and effort. During today's webinar, you will hear me reference CAST, or the Center of Applied Special Technology, frequently. The Universal Design for Learning framework was developed by the Center for Applied Special Technology, which is now known simply as CAST. CAST developed the framework using peer-supported research in the fields of neurology, cognitive learning psychology, instructional pedagogy, and literacy, with support from expert UX designers, software engineers, educators, literacy researchers, and of course, learning scientists. More recent initiatives have been focused on updating the framework to reflect access needs. The process is continuous, as CAST updates their research to maintain an effective platform on which to implement the guidelines for universal design for learning. According to the Center for Applied Special Technology, the UDL guidelines are organized both horizontally and vertically. Vertically, the guidelines are organized according to 3 principles of UDL: engagement, representation, and action and expression. The principles are broken down into guidelines, and each of these guidelines have corresponding checkpoints that provide more detailed suggestions. Horizontally, the guidelines are organized into 3 rows. The access row includes the guidelines that suggest ways to increase access to the learning goal by recruiting interest and by offering options for perception and physical action. The build row includes the guidelines that suggest ways to develop effort and persistence, language and symbols, and expression and communication. Finally, the internalized row includes the guidelines that suggest ways to empower learners through self-regulation, comprehension, and executive function. Taken together, the guidelines lead to the ultimate goal of UDL, which is to develop expert learners who are each in their own way resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal-directed, and purposeful and motivated. Let's take a look at the CAS UDL guidelines on the screen. The first is the multiple means of engagement. Under access, we have optimize individual choice and autonomy, optimize relevance, value, and authenticity, and minimize threats and distractions. Under the build row, we have the providing sustained effort and persistence, heightened salience of goals and objectives, vary demands and resources to optimize challenges, foster collaboration and community, increase mastery-oriented feedback, and under internalize, we have self-regulation, under which we have promote expectations and beliefs that optimize motivation, facilitate personal coping skills and strategy, and developing self-assessment and reflection. Students that meet these achieve the goal of being purposeful and motivated. Under the means providing multiple means of representation, we have the options for perception, offer ways of customizing display of information, offer alternatives for auditory information, offering alternatives for visual information. And under perception, we have language and symbols, in which we can clarify vocabulary and symbols, clarify syntax and structures, support decoding of text, mathematical notation, and symbols, promote understanding across languages, and illustrate through multiple media. And finally, we have providing options for comprehension, in which we can activate or supply background knowledge, highlight patterns, critical features, big ideas, and relationships, guide information processing and visualization, and maximize the transfer and generalization. Students that achieve all of these will be resourceful and knowledgeable. And of course, we have the provision of multiple means of action and expression. Providing options for physical action means varying the methods for response and navigation, and optimizing access to tools and assistive technologies, which we'll cover in more detail a little later. The next is providing options for expression and communication through the use of multiple media for communication, the use of multiple tools for construction and composition, and building fluencies with graduated levels of support for practice and performance. And finally, we have providing options for executive functions, such as guiding appropriate goal setting, supporting planning and strategic development, facilitating managing information and resources, and enhancing the capacity for monitoring progress. A student that achieves these strategies will be strategic and goal-oriented. Universal design for learning is based upon widely replicated research. Evidence in student improvement can be seen in most research reports. Current research indicates that UDL framework is critical in successfully designing effective instructional strategies, which are for all learners. From neuroscience to cognitive psychology, foundational research on UDL is deeply rooted in teaching pedagogy, cognitive development, and the utilization of scaffolding and modeling techniques. It is important for educators to understand the research origins of UDL as they apply scientifically supported instructional strategies in their classroom. The principles or tenets of UDL have also been thoroughly researched in the field of neuroscience. The principles were determined based on the theory that the human learning occurs in three separate networks: recognition, strategic, and effective. Each of the principles is aligned to a network, and each of these networks is aligned to a method in which the brain learns. The recognition network is the what of learning, the strategic is the how of learning, and the effective network is the why of learning. Educators should consider leveraging as many resources as possible to best apply the scientific research to their classrooms. UDL framework and the principles are heavily researched tenets for the successful application of instructional strategies that are scientifically proven to improve student engagement and outcomes. Within the principles of universal design for learning, there are four interconnected components that require definition. Goals. Goals are the individual learning expectations, which teachers have of each student. Typically, they are tied to curriculum standards and represent a learning objective tied to a specific outcome. They represent subject area knowledge and skills that students build their knowledge upon as they progress through the curriculum. Methods are the various instructional strategies which teachers implement in their classrooms to engage students in achieving their learning goals. These instructional strategies are evidence-based and include scaffolding, individualized instruction, group learning activities, and variable forms of engaging content delivery. Materials represent the vast array of media and physical content used to demonstrate content and learning. Effective instructional strategies leveraging UDL principles will contain a variety of audio, visual, tactile, and digital materials. Diversity in instructional materials is critical in offering students multiple ways in which they can both interact with and demonstrate mastery over content. To accurately measure learner progress through lessons and assess goals attainment, instructors must utilize a variety of formative and summative assessments, which consider student communication preferences and their strengths. Teachers may assess students using verbal, written, digital, or practical assignments. Providing students with multiple ways to demonstrate skill mastery and content acquisition is a key component of successful implementation of the UDL principles. Let's discuss the why or the effective network. A diverse group of learners engages with material in different ways. Providing multiple means of engagement is critical in reaching all students. And the engagement piece of the UDL framework is associated with the effective network of the brain. Engagement is dependent on the brain's recognition network, the network tasked with the what of learning. To facilitate greater engagement, educators should prepare a diverse group of avenues for engagement in learning activities and lessons. To successfully do so, teachers may leverage group discussion to garner input from students on how classroom assignments and learning tasks are designed and implemented. By providing students with a platform on which to vocalize their preferences, teachers can ensure that engagement is tied to their individual group's preferences while gathering valuable data on their own students' need. With each different classroom of students, teachers may need to modify their strategies to facilitate different groups of personalities and preferences. Let's talk about implementation of engaging classroom activities. Garnering information from students on their learning preferences is a task that should be a part of a teacher's ongoing instructional routine. Upon receiving adequate student input, teachers may then design classroom activities which leverage students' diverse perspectives and experiences. A good example of implementing these strategies is the use of activities that require students to solve real-world problems in small or whole group instruction. These real-world problems may have an overarching objective broken up into smaller objectives, which leverage a variety of skill sets. These activities provide students with various opportunities to contribute to the group effort by utilizing their individual skill sets. Additionally, teachers implementing these complex activities should ensure to share a scope of instructional references or subject material. This allows students the opportunity to conduct their own research within the scope of the assignment and to apply their own diverse perspectives to problem solving. Not all students comprehend and perceive information in the same way. By presenting assignments and content using a diverse array of delivery methods, teachers can reduce barriers caused by disabilities and language or cultural differences. What is representation? Representation can best be described as providing students with a diverse methods of information presentation. Within the context of students with disabilities, this can be as simple as considering sensory or learning disabilities when presenting information, learning projects, and assignments, and providing these students with alternative means to interpret or experience the content. By providing students with different methods for approaching content, teachers can remove cultural and language barriers, as well as any barriers which are made more challenging for students with disabilities. Considering representation means steering clear of the one-size-fits-all approach and providing differentiated instruction for diverse groups of learners. When preparing content that is approachable for all students, teachers should consider perception, language, and comprehension. Providing content to students using varied vocabulary provides students with the language barriers additional avenues for content acquisition. Students with physical disabilities, such as vision or hearing impairments, may require alternative means of content delivery, which are better suited to their needs. To successfully offer multiple means of representation requires that teachers develop multiple content delivery systems and activities which consider the needs of their entire student population. To provide students with multiple means of representation, educators focus on delivering content via a variety of engaging formats. Teachers can provide content in multiple formats by leveraging technology and media resources. The use of videos, audiobooks, mobile and tablet applications, and web tools that automatically transcribe or read text are some great examples of tools that provide students with multiple ways to learn. For example, the use of auto transcription software can help students with auditory impairments or students with reading preferences to obtain the knowledge in video media materials. Presenting the video with subtitles offers students both visual and auditory modalities for engaging with the same material. Another way to reduce learning barriers is to provide students with supplemental materials, such as vocabulary lists, notes for defining the structure of lesson elements, and links to text and audio resources. This not only supports student research skills growth, but also provides them with multiple formats in which to engage with the content, which are based on their learning needs and preferences. There is no single optimal way for all students to interact with content and showcase skill acquisition and mastery. What are action and expression? Action and expression are associated with strategic networks, or the how of learning. Students connect with content in a variety of different ways, from physical action to verbal expression. Allowing students to express their understanding of content in a variety of ways can promote engagement while providing teachers with a better means of formative assessment as they progress through lessons. Teachers can begin to integrate instructional strategies which promote varied action and expression by providing students with alternative means of engaging with physical activities, such as allowing students to use computers, tablets, pen and paper, or verbal responses to connect with content. Additionally, teachers can leverage instructional technology to provide students with multiple means of communication with both each other and the teacher. In practice, teachers can allow students to use multiple communications tools to express their skills mastery. Physical action refers to varied methods for response available to students during exercises and classroom activities. Alternatives can include the use of computers or clickers for activities that are traditionally written. Providing students with a means to answer questions verbally or using adaptive keyboards are also ways to allow students a variety of action means. Expression and communication refer to the multiple means for communication, typically through the use of a diverse array of media tools and software. Teachers that effectively leverage instructional technology to provide students with alternative means of communication can provide students with language or cultural barriers with more opportunities to participate and engage with the material. Students may use storytelling techniques, writing, or additionally, teachers may consider the implementation of debates and/or the use of presentation software for students to present their mastery of the topic through oral presentation. A variety of instructional technology can provide teachers with new ways to remove barriers while promoting engagement. Applying UDL within a classroom or for a caseload of students starts with 3 initial steps. Defining appropriate goals that allow for multiple means of attainment, assessing diverse learner needs, and evaluating barriers that may exist within the current curriculum. Teachers can set appropriate goals for a diverse group of students by presenting expectations that allow students multiple ways in which to resolve or demonstrate a skill or problem at hand. Goals should always be aligned to state standards, with flexibility in various methods through which a student may communicate skill mastery and interact with the content. Providing students with these multiple avenues facilitates learning by removing barriers while supporting state's curricular goals. The product is a group of students who can engage with the content using multiple methods and use various platforms to demonstrate skill mastery. Assessing the needs of a diverse group of students requires teachers to ask certain questions, such as, what are my students' primary languages? What cultural barriers might be evident in my classroom? What are my students' strengths and learning styles? How do my students prefer to engage with content? And what are shared or common interests that my students have with one another? These questions allow teachers to draw a map or diagram of the individual and overlapping needs of their unique student group. No two classrooms are alike, and the need for identifying this information is critical in identifying barriers and effective instructional strategies for providing our students with the most engaging access to a learning environment. In many cases, curriculum may be designed with a universal fit in mind. Unfortunately, this mindset does not consider the diversity of a typical classroom's student population. Individualized teaching strategies promote learning by addressing content interests and strengths. To identify and evaluate barriers, students must be prepared to analyze the curriculum within the context of Universal for Design learning principles. Identifying curriculum barriers requires teachers to carefully consider the format and delivery method in which state standards are presented and determine whether special considerations have been taken for the unique needs of their diverse student population. Consideration for multiple avenues of action and expression, as well as different mediums to provide a variety of ways in which to engage with content, are necessary during the evaluative stage. The implementation of effective UDL instructional strategies depends heavily on the effective removal of barriers using a variety of assistive or alternative instructional technologies for curriculum support. Successful implementation of UDL strategies is heavily dependent on the implementation of instructional technology in combination with flexible curriculum. The goal is to establish a learning environment in which students can connect with content, exhibit skills and competency mastery, and engage with their peers with as few barriers as possible. To support this, teachers should use multiple engaging formats for communicating information and curriculum content. Teachers may also leverage critical thinking and group activity structured projects to allow students to develop interpersonal relationships. An example of this is the use of an in-class debate project, in which every student in the class is assigned to one of two groups. Teachers may encourage the groups to present their arguments and counter-arguments in a format that is appropriate to the needs of their student group, or in a multimedia format, which can include written, visual, or verbal presentations. To support the content delivery and engagement phase of the activity, the teacher would provide students with access to a variety of multimedia software and assistive technologies, such as alternative keyboards, voice-to-text software, and text-to-speech software. This method of multi-tiered barrier removal provides students with learning environments that are with as few restrictions as possible for a diverse group of learners. Let's talk about removing the barriers. Identifying and removing barriers is a crucial component in the effective implementation of UDL principles for students, especially adult students with disabilities. Teachers can effectively remove barriers by optimizing the use of instructional and assistive technology, which is designed to assist students with various disabilities and provide easier access to those tools. Having assistive instructional technology may not always be enough. Providing students with access and support is also necessary for successful implementation. Many learners with and without disabilities may have some difficulty navigating curricular materials. Using assistive technologies, these students can be provided with multiple avenues in which to access and interact with content. To remove barriers, it is important for teachers to focus on providing access to these tools rather than forcibly imposing them on students. Providing students with open access to alternate keyboards, speech-to-text devices, drawing boards, touchscreens, or alternative mice and other pointer devices allows students to make decisions about how they want to learn. So I did include a handout with the webinar today, which covers and has a lot of links to the resources that I used to put this together. The CAST UDL website has extensive publications on each of the UDL principles, as well as their implementation in the classroom. And it really focuses on removing a lot of these barriers and providing access to students by presenting the material in a variety of formats. So as you develop your curriculum, feel free to use these tools to kind of present it in a manner that is with as little barriers as possible for these students. If you can provide it verbally as well as written and allow students with a multiple different avenues to engage with the content and submit their work, you are effectively engaging with the student and effectively tearing down these barriers. The Oakland University also has an excellent breakdown of each of these principles for UDL, as well as some instructional strategies and activities that can be used in the classroom. And I really like these teaching strategies because they are not age specific. So, for us in adult education, I found that they were very useful. They can be integrated into an IET program or a career and technical program with very little difficulty. And the teaching strategies are very clear. So all of these resources are available in the attached handbook to the presentation on the last page. And I am going to open the floor at this time for a couple of minutes for some Q&A. I'm going to check the questions here and see if we have any questions. Okay. So once again, if you do feel like you want to ask a question, okay, here we go. Is UDL differentiated instruction? So not necessarily. UDL focuses a lot more on removing barriers. Now, differentiated instruction obviously is an excellent instructional strategy that can be used in combination with UDL. So, differentiated instruction is kind of similar in the sense that you're providing the material in a variety of formats, but UDL is more focused on removing barriers and more focused on access to the information. UDL also is really centered around the use of assistive technology and the use of instructional media to support your lesson plan. An example would be if you're going to play a video in class, ensuring that the video has subtitles, so that maybe students with auditory difficulties or with reading preferences have another way to engage with the video. All right. Once again, if you do have any questions, you'll go ahead and put those in the question box. I'll wait a few more seconds and see if anybody else has any other questions. All right. It does not seem like we have any more questions today. I do want to thank all of you for listening to my webinar. It was a pleasure. As always, at this time, I'm going to hand over the mic to June Raw for some feedback.
Alex, thank you so much. I know there was a lot of information in that webinar, and you provided a lot of great resources that we can go back to and listen to and do some research more on. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Now you'll see 3 short questions that appear on your screen. If you would take just a minute to answer those questions, we always value your feedback and want to know how you like the webinar. While you do that, I will remind you that next week, December 14th, we will have a webinar. The webinar is called Building an Adult Education ESOL Community of Teaching Practice through Online Professional Development. So it's on the IPDAY website. Please go and register for it if you haven't already. And with that, I wish all of you a lovely day, the rest of your day, and thank you so much for joining us today. And Alex, thank you for doing a great presentation.